Hello everyone, I'm Serena Fazan of the Serena Fazan Network, brought to you by Red House Streaming. We are committed to helping those impacted by Hurricane Ian. You can see the unprecedented damage caused after Ian made landfall just short of a Category 5 storm. So many lost their lives. Thousands are without homes as a massive recovery mission is underway. We are teaming up with the Red Cross. Please join us in this rebuilding effort. It's as simple as scanning the QR code or following the link below. Stay safe.
Everyone has a story to tell. It's my mission to tell it. Unscripted, unedited. We are on the record.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this episode of On the Record, where we hear from incredible people and their inspiring stories. Today's topic, certainly one that I am so passionate about, and I think everybody is, our children. Certainly one of the greatest gifts of life. But sometimes having a child is not as easy as we think it is. So we have assembled a very special panel here. We have Souad Dreyfus, we have Robert Terenzio, and Dr. Celso Silva. How did I do on the names?
You did great.
You did good. You did good. Thank you. So it's actually a very emotional topic, so I wanted to start, on the light note. But let's start with you, Souad, and tell us about your agency, Open Arms.
So I am the owner and founder of Open Arms Surrogacy, and we've been in business operating since 2003. So next year will be 20 years in business. And what we do is help couples and individuals from all over the world, help them complete their family through a third-party reproduction. So we provide egg donors and surrogate mothers, and we manage the process from beginning to end. And we collaborate quite a bit, obviously, with reproductive attorneys like Robert Terenzio and Dr. Silva, and assist in the whole process from beginning to end.
And congratulations. I cannot believe it's going to be 20 years next year. Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So speaking of the legal aspect, please introduce yourself and share your role.
Well, once they've seen the doctor and they've discussed what the issue is, and Souad gets involved to put the pieces in the puzzle, they need an attorney to make sure that when the puzzle's complete, the appropriate names go on the birth certificate, and that's what I do. So I've been doing this for 25 years, over 5,000 babies.
Congratulations.
I think I was the first attorney to do it exclusively. We don't do anything else in my office but this.
And that's what I also found so interesting. And your team is international, so we have a lot to talk about because there's so many layers of that aspect.
Absolutely.
And so now, Dr. Silva, if you could, briefly tell us a little bit about yourself before we go in depth.
Yes, thank you. I'm a reproductive endocrinologist. I work for Shady Grove Fertility. We are one of the largest fertility practices in the country. And I've been doing this now for about 30 years as well. I did my training in Brazil, started practicing reproductive medicine there, and then came to the US several years ago to do a postdoctoral degree. Never went back and have made my entire career here. And what I feel that I do is to really help couples achieve their dream of becoming parents. Like you said, it's something that we all take for granted. We never really expected that one day when we want it, we will not be able to have children. In fact, we spend most of our life avoiding having children. And then when it does not work, I think it brings to couples, especially to women, a sense of being powerless and not being in control. So to me, it is truly a privilege to be able to be part of their lives during this process. And when we are finally successful, I think there are very few feelings that are like that.
Could ever match that feeling. I do share parts of my personal life on the record. So I was very blessed, honestly, guys, to have my child. I mean, there were no problems, no issues, but I waited a long time because in my career in broadcast journalism, oftentimes women wait to establish their careers. I can tell you though, most of my colleagues, they did not have as an easy time. Souad, talk to us about that. Like, you and I, why did you open up Open Arms? Yeah, just share the story that you were telling me.
Well, it's just fascinating to me. I was actually recruited by a fertility specialist to work with him in his clinic, and I just loved the setting. And I was exposed to this private struggle of infertility. It's something that we talk about quite a bit, and it's layered in shame as well. So I've seen couples and individuals walking in and walking out, and sometimes they're pregnant, sometimes they miscarry, sometimes they need an egg donor, sometimes it's sperm donor. So there's this whole world that I was exposed to that was just fascinating to me. And I felt like while someone like Dr. Silva can provide the clinical aspects of this process, when you go through egg donation or surrogacy or sperm donation, there is a lot more that you need as support. So this is where Open Arms, was born, and it helped me quite a bit. Talking about a personal level, seeing all of this process made me be more aware of my biological clock. So at 30, I had my first daughter, and by 32, I had second, and after that, which is the first time actually I talk about it, I went through early menopause really, really early by 36.
Did you really?
By 36. So if I had waited any longer than that, at 36, it was very early for me to go through early menopause. But just like that, in no time, you start dealing with low levels of hormones. Like my FSH was terrible. My follicle reserve just dropped in a heartbeat. So while I did not really struggle conceiving my children, really the timing is where the luck came. So I can relate to all of my clients when they go through that process of really wanting to conceive something that you feel for us as women should come really naturally. By the time you're you're going to meet the right person, then you're going to have a child, and then it doesn't happen.
I thank you so much for sharing that personal part of the story, because those are the kind of things that resonate. And Dr. Silva, we are going to go back to you to talk about freezing eggs, because that's a huge topic that's come up. But Robert, okay, let's go to you now though. When we talk about surrogacy and either sperm or egg donations, why is it important to talk to an attorney? Because I will say this before you start to answer, I know that different states have different laws, there's different international laws. I mean, thank you for just focusing on this one area, because I think we really need it.
Well, you pointed out the problem, because there are so many different laws, and with people coming from all over the world, it's just a patchwork of things. Each one may support the preceding issue, but sometimes they're directly antagonistic. And so somebody who has the education, not just being an attorney, by the way, but also going into classes to learn about the different laws and see how they interact and see how to work the problem through, is very important. Otherwise, you may be sitting like some people did with the Ukraine. They went to the Ukraine. There are children to parents there in the middle of a war zone that can't get out. The parents made a decision that they were going to go to the Ukraine because they were able to save money vis-a-vis what it cost here in the States. But you give up the predictability of the legal system that we have in the United States. In Florida, as an example, the surrogate is the surrogate is the surrogate. The parents can never have to worry about knowing that she may change her mind. It can't happen because the law says it can't happen.
Do we lead the nation in that? Do other states need to follow what we're doing, or where are we at?
That would be an egotistical response. I think that we're definitely up there. California is where a lot of the laws started percolating. And right after the first couple of California laws came into effect, and case law now, not statutory law, Florida made an incredible leap in logic and said, let's statutorily reflect what's going on in California. So everything was put in black and white here, and that was back in 1993. And it's been very stable ever since. Other states, Illinois and Texas come to mind, followed what we did.
Well, I always feel, and again, we need to talk more about this, but there has been a fear, and when covering traditional news, that someone donates an egg, sperm, that someone might come back and take that child away.
And it is a fear that I talk to both with the surrogacy side as well as with the gamete donation side. Again, just like the surrogate side was locked down by the legislature in '93, they also locked down gamete donation. So if you are a donor, that's your role. You can't come back later and say, no, I've changed my mind. I want my ova, or I want the embryos, or even worse, that's my child. Can't happen here.
And of course, we'll have, again, more questions on that. Dr. Silva, this might sound like just, such a basic question, but how difficult is it to get pregnant? I know everybody is different, but we have always heard, after a certain age,
right,
it's harder to get pregnant. So is there a certain age that is there a biological clock?
There is absolutely a biological clock. I think one of the fascinating things that my field has is the fact that you're not only seeing a patient or a couple presently at the moment, but you have to take into consideration what their reproductive plans are and contrast that with the current biological age of that patient, because the biological clock is real and it is inexorable. You cannot stop that. Biologically, every woman starts to lose her eggs by the time she was born. In fact, the laws start even before she was born. But they are losing eggs on any given month, even before puberty, through a very normal biological process. Now, the age of 35, that it is what a lot of us talk about, there is not a switch at the age of 35 that it's on and then the problem starts. It is that around the age of 35, the rate of loss of this woman's ovarian reserve, that's the term we use to talk about the quality and the number of the eggs that they have. Around that age, this ovarian reserve loss accelerates. So it has been going on, but at around the age of 35, this rate of loss accelerates. And it accelerates to a point that very rapidly, a woman may not even have any more viable eggs. So at around the age of 44, the ability that a woman has to conceive naturally with her own eggs is actually very small.
So Dr. Silva, I wanted to talk about what we were sharing prior to the show and the comparison to life insurance.
Yeah. So we were talking about fertility preservation, right? And fertility preservation is a concept because of the whole biological clock story, right? A woman, as she ages, she is losing quality and number of her eggs. And that is not something that we can stop in any way. Considering now that women are starting childbearing age much later in life than in the past, how can we prevent this biological clock, evolution? And the way to do that today is to freeze their eggs, right?
And so you would recommend that?
I do recommend that. I do recommend because I think that we, reproductive specialists, we see it in the receiving end of when this is a problem. So when you have a 40-year-old woman coming to your office trying to conceive and not being successful, and we do the workup and we realize that they are not being successful because she no longer has an egg supply, both in terms of numbers and in quality, then they will tell us why I did not freeze my egg when I was 30. Well, that is the whole concept of fertility preservation. And when we talk about it, how it works, what we need to do, they will pose to us the questions, well, should a woman then at the age of 30, 32, 35, should them freeze their eggs? And what I tell them when they ask me this is, I use the analogy of life insurance. I tell them, do you have life insurance? And they say, yes, I do. I said, well, when we get life insurance, we are not ever planning on using it.
And we hope we don't have to
And we
use.
hope we don't have it to use it. And when we do not use it, is still a successful story, right? If you live your whole life and your term life insurance policy has now expired and you didn't have to use it, it is still a successful story. So I try to use that analogy to them. I said fertility preservation is something that you should do, even if you do not need to use it in the future. So you are 30, you freeze your eggs because you're not planning to conceive in the foreseeable future. And then in the future, when you're ready to have a baby, you try. If it does work and you have all the children that you needed to have, and you no longer need the eggs that you froze, is still a successful story because you achieve your objective.
Yes, 100%.
Right? You achieve your objective. Alternatively, if you then try and you're not able to, and the reason is, well, I no longer have my eggs, you have eggs that you froze in the past that you can use. And with the technology that we have nowadays, it's a relatively new technology that is called vitrification. Our success rates with egg freezing are excellent. We can actually compare the success rate of a fresh egg and a frozen egg.
I think we need to do a whole other on the record just about that,
Segment
right?
just about that.
Because, Souad, when you hear these stories, tell us about, I can imagine, oh my goodness, when a client comes to you, I mean, do you sometimes hear, I wish I would have
yes.
frozen my eggs, or share some of those experiences? And I can't even imagine what these families are going through.
It's heartbreaking because you would think after 20 years I've heard it all. Every time I sit across from my clients, there is a heartbreaking story of sort, you know, either going through, except from the clients that are, for example, born without uterus. We've dealt with those cases many times. Okay, so you know from the get-go, this is your only option is through surrogacy because you're not able to carry your child. But when it comes to using an egg donor, the struggle is there, and sometimes we all agree that the intended parents will have to go through psychological screening to come at peace with the fact that she's now needing an egg donor to be able to conceive and have a child. And we work with them. We work with them in understanding the why first. We sit with the why, and there's a lot of regrets in the fact that there wasn't enough awareness for them to know. If only they knew. If only they know. Because if they knew, they would have. So now we're talking a lot more about it. We're talking about, okay, before you go through some aggressive treatment, let's say it's cancer treatment or whatnot, maybe you should consider retrieving your eggs prior to. Or if you know that you are going to pursue your career and you're going to delay childbearing, maybe you should consider freezing your eggs. We were talking earlier, I'm talking to my 17-year-old daughter about, it looks like you want to become a doctor.
Congratulations to her.
Yeah,
we
right?
love the SMART goals.
But my mind is going like, okay, when you're ready to have a child, will you be able to? So it's just really talking a little bit more about it. But the way I look at it, it's a win-win. Even if you did not know when you're here, at least you have the option to conceive through other means. A third-party reproduction is there. And it's not necessarily always a childbearing issue. You know, it could be a genetic issue as well that you're not able to use your eggs, and Dr. Silva can talk more about that. But there's all the variety of reasons to why someone may need a third-party reproduction assistance to conceive and have a family that they need.
And we are definitely going to go more into that. But before we head to the break, just one last question. Is there an average age of client that comes in?
Most of the time it's over late 30s, early 40s. I've had them even older. Every now and then we have clients that are in their 20s, and that's where we talk about a genetic issue that the client is aware of already, that she may not be able to use her own eggs, so we have to use an egg donor in that process.
And I'm certainly not a psychologist or a doctor, but at least sometimes if people know, that probably, I would imagine, is a little easier for their heart to deal with.
Of course.
But so oftentimes we don't know.
Yeah.
So we're going to go to a break, and we have so much more to talk about. So stay with us, everybody. We'll be right back.
Labelswap is a retail store that you can bring in the items you don't want anymore, we will buy them for either a cash offer or store credit, and you can also shop the items as well. We carry anything from H&M, Lululemon, up to your luxury items like Gucci and Louis Vuitton. There's nothing really around like it here in the market. It is a fun, personalized experience.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to On the Record. We're talking about a very emotional topic today, right? The path to parenthood. Sometimes it's easy to get pregnant, right? Quite frankly, but oftentimes it's not either. And so to continue the discussion, we were talking about people who come to see you, Souad, at Open Arms. How do people find you?
The almighty Google. Initially, when we were talking in the beginning of the interview, we talked about how private this struggle can be. So the first thing you do is start Googling, you know, what's going on, you know, what are putting your symptoms, kind of figuring out, okay, I need, you know, to figure this out through my OB. Maybe the OB will refer into a fertility specialist. So sometimes by the time they get to Dr. Silva, then he will say, okay, you need the help of an agency, you know, to find an egg donor, locate a surrogate, or a combination of both. And oftentimes they will come to me first, and from the agency, we will direct them. And I think that's probably the best way to start, because we can take the time to understand what it is that they're needing. It's no longer at the time where any doctor can do. You Google your physician, and based on the location. So I've had clients that are international, and Dr. Silva will make perfect sense because I know what it is that they are needing. So we kind of put the journey together for them when they say, okay, well, and sometimes they'll come to me and I would say, you don't even need my services. This is where you need to go. So not everybody that calls me needs necessarily an egg donor and a surrogate. They may, okay, I didn't conceive, so I think this is my next step. Well, there is a line of treatments prior to need, and I feel like we are the last stop really when it comes to infertility. So there is, you know, you can do, I mean, Dr. Silva can talk about the rest of the treatments that's available to someone that was not able to conceive right away before you bring the big guns, such an egg donor and a surrogate mom or a sperm donor.
Well, the reason why I did ask you that question is because this show, you know, as you know, is unedited, unscripted, and I wanted to hear you speak about that because it is so private, and people still, sadly, I think, are embarrassed about it or have shame about it, which they should not at all. But at what point do you bring in an attorney? And it's sad that we have to bring in an attorney, but we have to.
And
right,
we do.
Robert?
And we do, because being a parent is probably the most important thing we can do as an adult. And we need to ensure, if I could use that term, that at the end of the path, that birth certificate reflects the parent, and it's an unassailable reflection. But just as Souad was saying, I get phone calls from people who just begin their journey as well. And it may be a Google search, it may be that their neighbor was a client of mine. I get all kinds. But what's fascinating to me always is that there are a significant number of people that try to do this on their own.
So talk to us about that.
And I had a conversation this morning with a couple in Melbourne, Florida, who decided that they were going to do a surrogacy on their own without an attorney.
Without an attorney.
And
I mean, sorry.
I know.
Sorry,
You're hurting
right,
already. Like,
yes.
And now they're scrambling because the reality of all of this has caught up to them, and they realize that they're way behind the eight ball, and they need someone basically to bail them out. Because in most states, if you don't have the appropriate documentation in place, we need information from the doctor demonstrating the genetics. We need a contract demonstrating what all the parties are supposed to be doing. It's going to go in front of a judge, and these folks are going to have to adopt their own child. And isn't that a tragedy?
Right.
That's how Florida law was put into place in the first place, because the legislature said, we don't want people to have to adopt their own children. We want to give them a pathway so that they can be comfortable during the pregnancy, enjoy the pregnancy to the extent that they can, and know that the ending is going to be absolute. These folks don't have that luxury.
Gosh, and so there's so many questions that come to mind, and I know we might be going all over the place, right? But then a comment is made, and then you think about it. Like, for instance, like with this couple, but when they come to you, Souad, and talking about a surrogate mom or talking about, you know, donor egg or even donor sperm, do you find that there are so many specifics that the couple might be looking for? For instance, I have red hair. I clearly do not have red hair, but I want my child to have red hair and green eyes. You know, I mean, do you get that a lot too, on top of everything else that's going on?
When it comes to egg donation and the topic that, Robert, you touched on, we completely understand that this process is expensive. But when you start cutting corners in all the wrong places, not there is a place for you to cut corners, period.
No, but it's exactly what Robert said.
It's a tragedy. It leads you into tragedy. And you know what the funny thing, ironic thing is after the tragedy happened, then you start backtracking into how you should have done it in the first place. You are now seeking advice of an attorney. So when a client comes to me, before even commit to me, I offer that service. Just talk to me. I just want you to be well educated before you jump into this journey. I often reach out to Robert and say, okay, can you just do a legal consultation, please? And they both offer complimentary consultations. Dr. Silva will take the time.
Complimentary consultations. Yes, this is so important.
As a favor.
Please. No, honestly.
But we love that because he will definitely, both of them really, will take the time. Whether you end up hiring Open Arms, working with Robert, or hiring Dr. Silva, it doesn't really matter. What's important to us is that when you go on this journey, you're armed with enough knowledge not to make a mistake that is so tragic that ends up in the news, because it harms all of us, you know. So before you jump into that state, can we just find out whether it's okay for you to go into that state? Is it legal? Are you protected? Is it good for, it may be good for heterosexual couple, it may not be good for same sex, it may not be good for single parents. Also just understand, you know, your options when you speak with a physician. What's the process like? You know, what's the success rate? And then when talking to us, we start talking about, okay, let us understand where you're at and what you're looking for. Let us take that burden away of so much as unknown. So when you're looking for an egg donor, I sit with you and I really try to understand, okay, to your point, your eyes are green, you know, you have the Italian, you know, like olive complexion and whatnot. So when you come to me, I try to see whether that physical characteristics are important to you. So I'm not matching you with a redhead or a blonde or whatnot. And my clients, sometimes that's very important. I want someone who fits into the family. I want someone who has my physical characteristic to a point. And some may not be even interested in all of that. I just want someone who I connect with, or someone that has an educational background of some sort. When it comes to surrogate mothers, none of that is important because we're not using her genetics in all of this. She's just a carrier. None of it. Nonetheless, I've gotten interesting, you know, requirements sometimes when I say from my clients. They will say, you know, I don't want a certain ethnicity, or I don't want a certain background, or maybe I want her to be a stay-at-home mom, or she must be married. So we try to sit down with, okay, why does she have to be married? Is a support, okay, well, we want her to be supported in this journey. Okay, I get that. But what if she has a partner? What if she has a good network of friends that are supportive of her journey to become a surrogate? Oh, I didn't think of that. Okay, then she doesn't have to be married. Again, ethnicity doesn't really matter in this process, but we respect it. If someone is literally set across from someone that says, you know, she shouldn't be a certain religion because it was important to them that she is of a certain religion. So, you know, sometimes you just have to respect that request, and hopefully we're able to deliver.
And honestly, you know, I've heard so many stories too, and even personal stories from friends. A close friend of mine, they went the egg donor route, and it was very important to her that the baby did look like her and her husband, because she didn't want anybody to know. You know, she has opened up, but it took her her son is 15 years old now, and
Yeah.
it took that long. But speaking of the surrogacy, tell me if this is true or not, and Robert, you tell me if this is important. Someone said, and I know different states, different countries, different rules, different laws, that some surrogate moms have to be a parent, so they don't have the desire to keep the child that they carried for someone.
I think that that's the psychological side of things and the sociological side of things, but from a legal perspective, again, we want an absolute. We want to know that after the investment of money and emotion and time, that she's not going to even raise a hand to interrupt parentage. So when Souad talks to these young ladies and when Dr. Silva is interviewing them on his patient intake, we want to feel comfortable that their family building is done. And the good thing is that for those states that are, let's say, on the good side of surrogacy, all of their statutes talk about that. Your family building is done. And then the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, which is a body of doctors, mostly reproductive endocrinologists, that's right in their guidelines.
Right.
We want the surrogates to be done with their family building.
What is important about this is that there are risks with any one of these treatments as well, right? I always tell my patients that pregnancy is a risk proposition. I always tell my patients, you are pregnant, you're not sick, but let's remember that pregnancy do have complications. So if you engage the help of a gestational carrier who never had children, and once she conceives with somebody else's child, there is a complication, and that complication results in herself never being able to have children ever again. Well, if you already have completed your own childbearing, that has a very different impact than if she never had children before.
That
So that's
honestly
a
gave me
benefit.
goosebumps.
That's a very
But
important aspect.
also to that point, like how, if you've never given birth before, how do you know what to expect?
And this is another important aspect. So we talk about what do the patients want when they come to talk to you. I think what is really fascinating about what we all do is that there is never an identical case to the other.
No.
Patients and cases are so different from each other. So I have had patients who actually told me, I absolutely do not care how my egg donor looks like. For me, it's important that she is inclined to the arts, because both my husband and I are artists, so how she looks like is not important to us, but I would like to see if this genetic makeup of this person will bring some of that, for us. Whereas other people say, I don't care what she does, I just want to make sure that they are college educated. So this is very fascinating. And the gestational carrier have children plays a role in that as well, because think about it. You are going to be putting a lot of investment into this. And I'm not only talking about financial investment. There is an investment of time, there is an investment of emotions, there is certainly a financial investment as well. You want to make sure that you do everything that you can to secure success. Well, when you use a gestational carrier who have children before, she has given us biological proof that she can get pregnant.
Right. There's
Right,
actual
exactly.
data right there.
Right?
And I do want to talk about the financial aspect, but we'll save that for the third part of the show because there's many questions on that.
Right.
But speaking of surrogate mothers or carrying eggs, Elizabeth Edwards, God rest her soul, I remember at 50 years old, right, she carried, donor eggs, but she carried the twins. Is there an age, though, also where women should not be carrying the baby?
Yeah, well,
That's your question.
there are the biological aspects of your ability to become pregnant, and then there is because we can doesn't mean we should. So biologically, a woman will always be carrying the capability of becoming pregnant as long as she has a uterus and as long as I provided to that uterus the condition for that uterus to become receptive to an embryo. So a 75-year-old woman who is healthy, who has a uterus with hormonal replacement therapy, once I transfer an embryo into that uterus, she can conceive. should we do it? And that it's a very different story. So in my practice, we limited the ability of a woman to carry a child to the age of 50. And it's an arbitrary number, but this number comes from the fact that many studies have shown that the risks of a pregnancy increases to a very significant level after the age of 50.
Is that a universal number then?
Most,
50?
I wouldn't say universal, but I think that most people will agree that after the age of 50, the increase in risks of all the obstetrical complications is one that may be from an ethical point of view, it does not justify anymore for a patient to be carrying her own child. And with the gestational carriers, I find it is even more fascinating because we have to hold the gestational carriers to a higher standard. These are women who are living their life productively, healthy, and we are going to recruit them to carry a child for somebody else. So any complications with that pregnancy, it is our doing. So for example, to put a gestational carrier patient who is 55 years old through a pregnancy, when you do know that the risks of complications are much higher, from an ethical point of view, it's very difficult to justify.
Speaking of that, Souad, is there an age cap in your agency at Open Arms that a woman could be a surrogate?
Well, we go by the same guidelines of the American Society for Reproductive Medicine. So, and oftentimes when I have a surrogate mom, before even I present her to my clients, I probably will go to Dr. Silva, gather all of her medical records from OB care to delivery, pap smear and whatnot to give him a better idea. So he would tell me, okay, looking over what I see right now, I think she's suitable or she's not, or I may need more information, because we want to set up our clients for success. We want to give them a candidate that is able to carry that pregnancy successfully and with no complications if we can help it. And that's, again, takes us to the point number one of a surrogate must have given birth before she can even qualify. So we have a certain set of qualifications, and the age would be, we don't really go to 21, but technically it's 21 to 45. So when it's at 45, we like to see a recent pregnancy within the past couple of years, not 10 years ago. But at the end, it's not really our call. It's usually the physician's call to make that decision.
There are just so many questions. Were you going to say something, Doctor?
I was going to say, I mean, because of what I said, we believe that the gestational carriers have to be held at a higher standard. So an individual woman who is 48 years old, she has her own choice to say, I do want to take the risks of carrying a pregnancy myself when I am 48 years of age. That conversation with a gestational carrier, it's very different because she's not making the choice herself. She's making the choice in combination of other people. She's going to be carrying somebody else's pregnancy. She herself does not need to have children anymore. She's done with her childbearing. So in our opinion, you have to have higher standards of safety for a gestational carrier than you do for your own patients that are coming through the office.
And so this also leads to this question then to you, Robert. We always think about the legal side, that the parents who are going to become the parents need to have an attorney. Do the surrogate mothers and the donors also, should they consult a lawyer?
They absolutely must consult with an attorney because they need to know the exposure they may have legally if things go bad. But they also need to have a sense of security that every part of their journey, because their journey is independent, may be aligned with but independent of the parents, is safe legally. So there is not a match that I've ever been involved in where the surrogate or the egg donor or even a sperm donor have been unrepresented. I just won't get involved in those transactions at all.
Okay, save this thought because, again, we're already talking about a very sensitive topic. It's very emotional. but we also should talk about the financial aspect on all ends, you know, on also the surrogates and the donors potentially getting paid, on how much this can cost. So we'll go to a break and we'll come back and we'll talk about that. Stay with us.
Spring's break. If it hasn't happened, it will happen. Here at Precision, I get the question of, can you fix this same day? All the time. Nobody wants to wait a few days to get their garage door fixed. The face that they make every time I say I can fix this right now is priceless. No, I'm not an actor. Would I be a good actor? I could probably do it. I mean, this face is made for the camera.
Precision Door Service, a name you can trust.
Oh man, I'm gonna regret that.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to On the Record. Boy, what a conversation. The path to parenthood, and a path that many people have to take if they cannot naturally get pregnant. And I hate bringing in finances and cost, but we absolutely have to do it. Souad, tell us about, when we were talking about it, the biological aspect. If in open arms, say someone wants to be the carrier, or you explain it, you put it in your words, and does that add a complication? Do you take clients like that?
So the idea is, when we talk about the costs of surrogacy and egg donation, a combination of both, we understand that the cost is expensive. It's not cheap, but and that's the reason why we've seen many years ago a trend of going to India, because it's cheaper, going to the Ukraine and the mess with the war now, or going to Mexico, or even when we talk about gestational surrogacy, where the surrogate mother is not genetically related to the baby, versus a traditional surrogate where she is providing the eggs and carrying the pregnancy. So in this regard, the cost is far cheaper, but Robert can speak to the legal complications when it comes to someone who is providing the eggs and also carrying the pregnancy. Now, my agency, from the beginning in 2003, understanding the difference between gestational surrogacy and traditional surrogacy, I have decided that I would not do traditional surrogacy, period. So I just can't be part of something I can't trust the process. There's just so much risk. I'm not known to take, risk, especially with my clients when they come to me. I would never suggest to someone to hire a surrogate and then go through the surrogacy process as a traditional surrogacy. And like I said, Robert can speak more into the legal risk when you cut the corner and hire a traditional surrogate versus a gestational surrogate.
I know it's already so emotional, because in that case, they could keep the baby.
Right.
They can. In Florida and in most states, there's a window after the delivery that they can change their mind. And all of the case law will support the woman who carried the child. So these folks who said, hey, this is a great deal, we're saving X number of dollars by not also investing in an egg donor, are now faced with not having the child that they thought they were going to have at the end. And it's tragic, but it's predictable.
Honestly, it's making my heart pound. Can you imagine? I mean, I can't even imagine.
I think the worst part of that, also, to add insult to injury, is now you have a child that you may be responsible for support. Like the surrogate can go after child support as well in this case.
It depends on how it comes about. There's a couple of cases out in the Midwest where people decided to do home inseminations, and the buddy who decided to be the sperm donor ended up being the father he didn't want to be or didn't expect to be. So you've mentioned twice about using an attorney. These things are very complex. A lot of attorneys won't even do these.
And that's why this is the only area that you specialize in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, and then
The complexity of traditional surrogacy, which is a woman serves the role of an egg donor and also the woman that is carrying the pregnancy, is such that my practice and most of the practices in the country actually do not offer this as a service.
That's correct.
We do not even want that to be a service that we do.
And
because
do you
it's way too complex, unsafe for all involved, including the professionals that are, providing to that couple. The lack of us, the inability that we have to predict what's going to happen in the future creates a scenario that is unsustainable.
This is so interesting because I honestly would have thought it was the other way around, that it was easier. I mean, of course, the emotional risks of someone wanting the baby, but I thought most people went to that route, believe it or not.
No, because there is an assurance that comes with hiring a gestational carrier and knowing that that child is not hers. So also the surrogate mentally is ready and is capable of creating that separation between her and the baby, knowing that it's not really hers. There's also a clear separation at the birth between the surrogate and the baby, once she gives birth, which does not exist when you go the traditional surrogacy route. Like Robert was saying, you have 3 days to kind of sit there with the baby and decide whether you want to give him up and follow through with what you promised you would, or change your mind and keep the baby. You're within your right. That is the longest 3 days of your life going through this process.
And we all know when you hold a baby, and it's your baby.
And that is the reason.
Yeah. It's a great point.
And excuse me for interrupting, but there is a mistrust in the legal community about traditional surrogacy as well, because people will assume that you did not do an IUI insemination, that you just had sex, and you've made a deal with bio-dad, the biological father. Hey, you give me the child, I won't come and claim child support from you. The judges hate that. They hate it absolutely. It always ends up in some kind of a mess.
Messy.
Now, I've done many of them. I don't want to make it sound like every show is a Hallmark movie show, but it's just unpredictable what's going to happen, as you said a moment ago, when she's sitting there holding the child in her lap and has a window within which to change her mind.
I think that window is intentional. Like really sit with that decision and make sure this is what you want, which I honor. I like that. I like okay, you know what, maybe at the moment when you decided to become a traditional surrogate, there is a romantic notion of you wanting to do right or good or help someone. And then, okay, then you sit with it, okay, and many that are done successfully and they're fine. But who wants that risk?
That's a huge risk. That's a huge risk.
Because ultimately, right, I think we have to pay attention that no matter how much we want to cover ourselves with proper legal counseling, with proper medical care, with a great agency, these are extremely psychological processes that every one of these patients, surrogate, the egg donor, the intended parents, are undergoing. So to be able to predict how each one of them are going to react to all these different circumstances is just impossible. I'm very sure that what Souad mentioned is the initial motivation for any woman who decided to donate their eggs or who decided to be a gestational carrier. But what's going to happen from an emotional and psychological point of view to these people once they are in the middle of these processes, we don't know.
So in this process, like through your agency and in this process, once that beautiful baby, boy or girl, is born, the surrogate mother, the donor, the sperm donor, that's it. That's it.
It's clear as day. That's it. And that's, to me, is priceless. In knowing that you're going through this process with engaging an egg donor, that her legal responsibilities end here. Surrogates end here. Sperm donor ends here. And by the time the baby is born, you have all of your legal paperwork and the process is in order. There's just no guessing. There is nothing that's unpredictable. Going back to Dr. Silva's comments about the psychological aspects of this, I want to mention a story that I've had a client that came in from France, a mutual client of Robert and I, and she needed an egg donor, a married couple, she needed an egg donor, really struggled with using an egg donor that she does not know. So she decided to use her sister as an egg donor. And we said, okay, we can do that, that's fine, we can do that, but does your sister know all that's involved in this process? Yes, we've spoken about it. She feels good about it. Okay, so they travel all the way from France, and we sat down and we brought a psychologist to our office to meet with her. we let the sister sit with the psychologist, stepped out with the parents, we're talking about the process and what's involved. And the sister walks out, she's like, I don't think I can do it. I can't do it. So you travel all the way from France and you're here, and there's tension between family members, which we try to prep them for it. Because when she said yes, she came from a place of, you know, an emotional place of wanting to help her sister.
Yes, the love
but
of
what's all
family.
then you sit with a professional and you break down your act of kindness into what it really means. And it's fine. For some people it may work, but at least, you know, going through that psychological screening and talking to someone who's a professional in the field can help you either be grounded in your decision, yes, this is what I want to do, or, oh my God, I did not consider all these implications, this is not for me. So we ended up using an egg donor. They had their baby daughter, their baby girl, and everything is great, but it just stayed with me, and, you know, about that aspect once you speak to...
Well, consider a holiday dinner with the family.
Right? Is this your
And
aunt?
the sister knows that she is genetically related to this child, but she can't say a thing about it. She's certainly not the mother.
Right.
It has to be incredibly hard.
When it
I
comes
couldn't even
to
imagine it.
third-party reproduction, one major concern that the American Society of Reproductive Medicine has is coercion. Any form of coercion that you can imagine, a financial coercion, an emotional coercion, and they try as much as possible to prevent that by doing what Souad said. You bring the couple, you have them have independent counsel, you have them have independent psychological counseling. Once they have done independent psychological counseling, you have them done together, you know, combined psychological counseling, because it is only by doing this that things that are sometimes not that, you know, at the surface starts to come up, and you see people changing their minds. I thought I was going to do this, I cannot do anymore. I thought I was going to use my sister, but now after we delve into it, I realize she wants to give the eggs to me, but I don't want her eggs anymore because of this kind of
We
very...
can't help it. We're humans,
Human.
right?
Exactly.
We change
Yeah.
our minds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, and Dr. Silva, I'll start with you. Through my years of journalism too, I have seen at least, and we're not going to talk specific numbers because there's so many variables in different states, and you know, but do you feel insurance companies, some, or at least coming to the plate to help in this process from a medical standpoint?
Yeah, I not necessarily think that the insurance companies are doing this, but I think companies,
The employers.
the
Right.
employers,
The employers.
are becoming more aware that this is a great benefit to provide to your workforce. And when I say a great benefit, I do not mean that in a self-serving type of role, because a lot of people talk that, well, maybe if you offer, you know, fertility benefits to an employee, they are less likely to, you know, take time off, or, you know, I see this as a very genuine thing that some companies, especially the more forward-thinking companies, are doing. And we are seeing in our practices an increase in the number of patients that come to see us that have fertility benefits.
Well, I will go on the record. I think that would allure me
Yeah.
more to the company, even support the company.
Absolutely.
You know, even if I was not personally the
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
that needed
Yeah.
the infertility procedure. But what about the legal expenses? At this point, is there any help there?
There is some of the, again, it's probably the same companies that are going on the limb to offer fertility insurance or fertility benefits are also giving their employees access to some of the legal expenses. But for the most part, it's something that people will have to dig into their own pocket for. But relatively speaking, it's a small piece of the entire financial pie. So people feel less, people are less inclined to give up that particular benefit, to not seek out an attorney.
Wow. One of the most important aspects is seeking out an attorney.
Yeah,
absolutely
absolutely.
in this. So Souad, with you, I wanted to talk on both ends though, because to be a donor, you could get paid to be a donor, and also to be a surrogate.
Correct.
I've had a surrogate mom on the record before, and she has 2 kids, and she really wanted to help someone else, and she was a surrogate for a couple in France.
Okay.
Because it was impossible, their adoption laws. I'm not an attorney, so I'm not exactly sure of their specific laws, but there are financial benefits of being a donor and
A surrogate.
surrogate.
Mom. Yes, absolutely. We've seen an increase in compensation like everything else, but our egg donors, a minimum compensation will start at $6,000, and now there is actually really no cap. So I mean, we've paid an egg donor up to like $25,000 before. If she fits what the client is looking for, and they're willing and capable of paying, then there is just no cap really on the comp. Surrogate mothers can get a compensation starting between $30,000 and $40,000. And again, if you are an experienced surrogate, you'll be compensated more. If you're an experienced egg donor, the compensation is also higher. And there's a small financial benefits. We will pay for travel if travel is needed. Obviously, if she needs, she will have access to legal counsel that's also paid for. Anything that has to do with the IVF cycle or with the surrogacy journey or the egg donation journey is usually covered, from anything from medication to local monitoring to travel expenses, including flight, hotel, car rental, food per diem, in addition to her compensation.
With Open Arms, do you find more people, though, want to be a surrogate and want to be a donor because their heart it's something emotional for
I
them?
think it's, for us as we recruit, we really, we take a lot of time screening candidates that come to Open Arms. And it's important to us that, yes, we understand the compensation is attractive, but tell me something more. Tell me that you're doing it for other reasons. That cannot be the driving force to why you want to become an egg donor or a surrogate mother. It never works. It never works. If the first thing out of your mind, out of your mouth as a surrogate mom is how much, that to me is alarming. Can we talk about the process? Can we talk about what it is that you're looking for in a couple? What is your why? Let me sit down with your why. Why do you want to become a surrogate mom? And most of the time, we've been lucky and blessed to be, to connect with surrogate moms that are just driven by the fact that they've had easy pregnancies. They love being pregnant. They don't want to add any more to their family. They may have known of a family member or a friend that was going through this process, and the surrogate might have thought, I'm going to do it for them, and then they ended up either stopping the process or getting pregnant. So the idea kind of lingered, and just generally just helping someone. I mean, you really can't understand the way you, the impact you have as a surrogate mom for life on a couple when you help them achieve their dream of becoming a family. It's just incredible.
So what is the most attractive thing somebody could say if they want to be a surrogate or a donor?
What is the most attractive? I want to hear that you really, your heart bleeds for a couple, that you are an amazing parent, and that your children bring you so much joy that you can't imagine living without them, and therefore you can't imagine someone going through that suffering or that struggle, and you are capable of helping and giving a hand and help them become a family. I think that's that is what we hear the most. I have 2 children. I couldn't imagine my life without them. And to hear that someone is going through that struggle just breaks my heart. So if I can help, why not? That to me is like perfect.
If I can give an example of that, of what to me was the most incredible reason why somebody told me that they wanted to be a surrogate mother, was a woman who wanted to be a surrogate parent for a third-party intended parent, because her sister was born without a uterus, and she could not be the surrogate mother for her sister because certain clinics have first-degree relatives restrictions because of the whole coercion and so on and so forth. And she said, I cannot help my sister, but I see the struggling that she's going through. I wanted to be a surrogate mother for another couple because of this motivation. So to me, that was incredibly revealing.
Do you have a special story?
There's always a special story.
There's always a
Andra.
special
Special
story
story.
coming my way. You know, first I would touch that all of the psychological evaluations, all the psychological reviews that I've seen have demonstrated that the best surrogates are motivated to help. They're not motivated by money. And the better agencies will make sure that the surrogate is already working. This is not going to be her job. So if we remove that level of person from the mix, then you're getting to the real reality of why they're there in the first place. And that is always to help. It's always, as they report back to me, it's really selfless. They really want to help because they're done with their family building and they want to feel happy that they're able to help someone else achieve the same happiness that they have.
There's nothing
like
a child.
I recall really many moons ago, I had a surrogate mom who said that she had an abortion that she never got over, and she felt like she took a life, she wants to give a life back. So she wants to become a surrogate to bring a life to the world and donate her compensation to church. That was, to me, is
Absolutely.
incredible and mind-blowing, and sure enough, she got pregnant with triplets.
Oh my goodness.
Literally got pregnant with triplets. I'm like, okay, well, God had a plan there. Now, are you even? But yeah, triplets. And in this case, the parents decided to keep all three.
And I think another important aspect also is I don't see what an egg donor gets paid or a gestational surrogate gets paid as a payment, because they themselves are going through a process that is not easy to go through. So I see these more as a compensation, a reimbursement for their own
Time, pain,
life
suffering.
expenses that they're
Yes.
going through when they have to do this. And yes, if they live elsewhere, we pay them a plane ticket to come over here, but they're never really paying for everything that they having to do when they are carrying somebody else's child or when they are donating their eggs. So to me, this is more of a compensation for what you're doing rather than this is your job, here's your salary for doing this. That's the way that I see this. And I think most of the people that work with, I think we all agree, have that same feeling. I'm not going to say that this is not an important part of what they are doing, but that's not the main and only motivation that they have.
I mean, can you really put a price tag on somebody who's
can't.
carrying your child and caring for them for 9 months? You can't.
Can't.
You just can't. So all you can do is, it's almost like a token of appreciation. Let us honor you in this way. And even legally, I think it's worded in such as a reimbursement for
For
is it pain and
carrying the
suffering
child,
or
not for handing the child over.
that's a huge difference also.
But you know, we know a couple, personal friends who are in France, and every year they come to the States to visit their gestational carrier. The girls are in their 20s now.
Isn't that something?
That's a long-term relationship that arose out of this woman saying, I would like to help. How could it get any better than that?
It just can't. And I just need to ask this one last question. Doctor, and thank you, Robert, for bringing this up. Is there a certain age, though, where you have to say, no, you cannot become a parent?
Well,
That's a tough one, right?
know.
Like, do you-
there is, okay? There is. In my practice, we will limit the age at which a couple or an individual person can come to us and say, I'm going to use an egg donor, I'm going to use a gestational carrier, and therefore I'm meeting every other criteria. We will stop them if they are at an age or a medical condition point of view that we feel that they're not going to be around for their children. Because again, I think what fascinates what we do is our patients are also the children that is going to come out of all of these treatments that we offer. We can't forget that in reality we are bringing another life to the world. And we have to care for that life that is yet unborn. And one way to care is to pay attention if a person that it is committing to a treatment like this is going to be around for a reasonable amount of time to provide to this child, right? And the way that I like to answer that question is while these limits do exist, they are a moving target for the simple reason that our life expectation in the world is changing. People that were not able to be productive in their lives when they were in their late 60s perhaps, nowadays are very productive professionals out there. So the life expectancy, the productivity, the ability that a person has to still be productive is changing over time. Therefore, your ability to bring a child to the world and raise that child is also changing over time.
You know, I would add to that life doesn't end just because you're having a child or you're going through the process to have a child. Because we've dealt with married couples where either just prior to the delivery or even within a year or two after the delivery, one of the parents has passed.
Yeah.
And so having some guideline on when to start or when to not permit people to start these sorts of things, I think is incredibly important, because there are other things going on in our world, like cancer, and that may impede the child's development to now, instead of having two parents, maybe one.
Yeah.
Now imagine if we had a single parent surrogacy and that person passes. The child is now without a parent ostensibly, and now we have to figure out how to work things out.
Yeah, but part of your legal process also, that we talk to our clients about, thinking about two guardians. It doesn't even matter what your age is. As long as you engage into the surrogacy process, you have to name two guardians to take over, God forbid something happens to you. It also brings a sense of comfort to the surrogate that this is not an issue for me to worry about, because there's always, if not both parents, it's one of them. If not one of them, there's two guardians that can step into taking care of the baby if we have to. Thankfully, we never had to.
Thankfully,
ever.
Yeah, exactly.
hopefully, we never have to. So many questions, which I have to say, we're going to have to do another show. Right? We're going to definitely have to do another show. What an all-star panel here, though, today. I really appreciate the three of you coming on. Dr. Celso Silva, I did that right. Robert Terenzio, I said it right the first time. Terenzio.
It's okay.
And Souad Dreyfus.
That's all that matters, as long as you get mine right.
Yeah.
No, you all are so wonderful, and we so appreciate you coming on the record. And it was a recommendation, in fact, that you come on the show, and that's why we take such pride in this show, because we really do try to share important messages that the community wants to hear from. And what is more precious than a child? So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And for our viewers out there, if you have a story that you would like to recommend, please email us at info@redhousestreaming.com. We also encourage you to share these stories. We feel they're very informative. Share the shows, because a lot of people have a lot of questions out there. We're also on Roku. And once again, thank you so much for watching, everybody, and stay safe. Hello, everyone. I'm Serena Fazan of the Serena Fazan Network, brought to you by Red House Streaming. We are committed to helping those impacted by Hurricane Ian. You can see the unprecedented damage caused after Ian made landfall just short of a Category 5 storm. So many lost their lives. Thousands are without homes as a massive recovery mission is underway. We are teaming up with the Red Cross. Please join us in this rebuilding effort. It's as simple as scanning the QR code or following the link below. Stay safe.